About 5 years ago, a YouTube channel called Soft White Underbelly drove into odd West Virginia and found a family that would change everything. Their name was the Whittakers, and they weren't just another family in a small town. They lived with the weight of poverty, disability, and isolation. For decades, they had been regarded as outsiders in their community. Then one day a man named Mark Leiter pointed a camera at them, and suddenly they were seen by millions. Mark's channel was already known for interviewing people on the fringes of society: drug addicts, sex workers, people living lives most of us never see up close. But when he met the Whittakers, he stumbled upon something different, something he knew the internet would not be able to look away from. His camera captured their reality: the cluttered house, the disabilities, the struggles, the way they lived so far from what most people consider normal. It was raw, unfiltered, and shocking. That first video spread like wildfire. More than 45 million people watched the Whittakers' lives unfold, and from there, nothing was the same again. Think about it: 45 million people looking at your family, dissecting every movement, every sound, every expression. Some were horrified, some were heartbroken, others laughed, and as the numbers climbed, so did the money. YouTube pays well when a video takes off, and Mark also launched a GoFundMe to raise money for a new house for the family. At first, it seemed like this was a rare story where viral fame would actually change lives for the better. Mark even went out of his way to do things with them off camera, taking them to Walmart, getting them haircuts, doing small things to show he cared. And maybe he truly did. But even if his heart was in the right place, intentions don't always matter when the impact cuts deeper than anyone could imagine. Because here's the truth: the Whittakers weren't signing up for stardom. They didn't understand the global spotlight that was suddenly shining on them. Their world was so small before all this, and then overnight it became massive. People didn't just watch them, they judged them, mocked them, obsessed over them. For some viewers, it was cruel entertainment. For others, a sad reminder of hidden poverty in America. But for the Whittakers, the meaning of it all was probably confusing and painful. Money complicates everything, especially when it lands suddenly in a family not used to having any. The GoFundMe fund became a controversy. Allegations swirled that drugs and bad decisions drained much of the money before it ever helped them. It became a story not just of generosity but of loss, suspicion, and betrayal. And then Mark, the man who had brought them into this new world, walked away. He stopped filming them. He cut ties. Maybe he saw that things were spinning out of control. Maybe he wanted to protect his own reputation. Or maybe he just decided the Whittakers' story was no longer worth the trouble. Whatever his reasons, his absence left a hole. But on the internet, a hole like that never stays empty. Other YouTubers rushed in, eager to grab attention from the same source that had made Mark's videos explode. They showed up at the Whittakers' house with cameras. They streamed live. They posted endless shorts. It stopped looking like a documentary and started looking like a circus. The family's hardships, once framed as a kind of raw documentary, became day-to-day entertainment for a hungry audience. Eventually, the attention became too much. Timmy, Lorraine, and Ray, 3 members of the family, were taken from the home by the state. For a family so tightly bound together, that was devastating. Imagine living your whole life in one small, fragile world, only to see it broken apart because strangers online turned you into a spectacle. Imagine losing your family not because of a crime, not because of violence, but because the internet couldn't stop watching you. And that's the cruelest part. If the cameras had never shown up in odd West Virginia, the Whittakers might still be together. They might still be living their hard but private lives. Instead, their world was blown open, their struggles magnified, their flaws exposed, and their fate sealed in front of millions. This is how internet fame works. YouTube rewards the strange, the shocking, the painful. The Whittakers weren't the first to be exploited like this, and they won't be the last. Once people realized how much attention they could generate, the family became content. Every livestream, every short, every exploitative clip was fuel for views, likes, and donations. And the Whittakers became less like human beings and more like characters in a never-ending drama. That's the curse of their fame. When I think about the Whittakers, I can't help but also think about us, the viewers. Why do we watch? Why do we click on these videos? Is it empathy, curiosity, or is it something darker? The story of this family forces us to confront those questions. Because whether you believe they were helped or exploited, the fact remains their lives will never be the same, and not in a good way. Their story isn't just about one family in West Virginia. It's about what happens when the internet shines a light on people who never asked for it. It's about what we consume as entertainment and what it costs the people on the other side of the camera. And as this story unfolds, one thing becomes painfully clear. What looked like a chance for help turned into a tragedy that could not be undone. So the question I leave you with is this: were the Whittakers helped, or were they cursed? Let me know what you think, because the story is just beginning. The Whittakers' story didn't end when Mark Leiter stepped back. In many ways, that's when things really spiraled. The internet doesn't forget, and it doesn't forgive. Once a family or an individual becomes viral, they are stamped with a mark that's impossible to erase. The Whittakers had gone from unknowns in a tiny West Virginia town to international figures of fascination. and when the man who introduced them to the world pulled away, others stepped forward to claim his place. At first, it might have seemed like a continuation of the same narrative, YouTubers arriving to help, to film, to raise awareness, but the tone was different. Mark's style had always been documentary-structured interviews, longer-form storytelling, a slower pace. The new wave of creators didn't come to document, they came to entertain. Their goal wasn't to preserve dignity, it was to capture chaos. Suddenly the Whittakers weren't the subjects of thoughtful videos anymore, they were the stars of live streams. The focus of endless short clips pushed out on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube Shorts. Every smile, every odd habit, every argument or misstep was clipped, edited, and recycled for views. The family's home became a stage, their lives became a series, and their misfortunes became the punchline. The impact was immediate. Videos poured out by the dozens, then the hundreds. Each creator who showed up had their own spin. Some tried to frame themselves as saviors, others leaned into shock value. Some even played up the drama between different family members for effect. The audience, already massive, only grew hungrier, and because the internet runs on engagement, the worse things got, the more the audience wanted. For the Whittakers, the consequences were devastating. Fame they never asked for had now trapped them in a cycle of scrutiny and exposure. Their flaws were broadcast to strangers, their hardships became entertainment. Their privacy was gone, and yet because of the financial incentives behind this machine, there was no way to shut it off. The worst part was the way money poisoned everything around them. Donations continued to flow, but the question was always, where did it go? Some claimed it was used responsibly. Others accused handlers, creators, or even family members of skimming off the top. Rumors of drugs, manipulation, and exploitation swirled like storm clouds over the entire saga. And once that trust was broken, there was no repairing it. Then the unthinkable happened. Timmy, Lorraine, and Rotha, very people who had become the faces of this bizarre online fame, were removed from the home by the state. Their health, their living conditions, their constant exposure all played a role. For viewers watching from afar, it was dramatic, almost like a plot twist in a show. But for the family, it was tragedy. Imagine being part of a family that, despite its dysfunction, had always stuck together. That fragile bond was shattered, not because of natural circumstances, but because millions of strangers had invaded their world through a camera lens. They were taken from one another, scattered, and placed into the care of systems that never truly understood them. And through it all, the cameras kept rolling. Other creators showed up to capture the fallout. They live-streamed the aftermath, filmed emotional breakdowns, recorded family members crying, and posted updates speculating about where Timmy, Lorraine, and Ray had been taken. The tragedy itself became content. It's here where the line between empathy and exploitation completely blurred. Some viewers said they watched because they cared about the family, because they wanted to see them get help. Others admitted they were just fascinated, unable to look away from the train wreck. In truth, most viewers were caught somewhere in the middle, part empathy, part curiosity, part entertainment. And the YouTubers feeding this cycle knew exactly what they were doing. They played on that mix of emotions, keeping audiences hooked, while pocketing ad revenue, donations, and clout. This is the nature of what many call poverty porn. It's content built on the struggles of others, packaged to pull at heartstrings or shock the senses, all while funneling money and fame to the person behind the camera rather than the people in front of it. The Whittakers didn't sign up for fame, but they had become the ultimate example of how isolated the internet chews up vulnerable lives for consumption. Meanwhile, their actual needs were ignored. Their house was still falling apart. Their health was deteriorating. Their diet consisted of chips, sandwiches, and junk food. Some were battling heart problems, knee problems, issues that required serious care. What they needed was a proper home, medical support, and dignity. What they got was chaos, exploitation, and division. As this continued, a strange kind of celebrity culture formed around them. People across the country and even around the world knew their names, recognized their faces, and debated their story in comment sections and forums. They were famous, but for all the wrong reasons. Fame had cursed them, not blessed them. Wherever they went, eyes followed. Even if they wanted to disappear back into anonymity, it was impossible now. Their faces had been burned into internet history. The saddest part of all of this is how inevitable it feels. Once you understand the machine of online content, you can see how their story was destined to play out this way. A vulnerable family made viral. Millions of clicks, donations and money flooding in, creators fighting for access, exploitation dressed up as empathy, and eventually, the system collapsing on itself, leaving the very people at the center broken, scattered, and worse off than before. For Mark Lataire, walking away may have seemed like the responsible choice, but walking away didn't undo what had been set in motion. It didn't take the videos down. It didn't erase the 45 million views. It didn't restore the family's privacy. The exposure was permanent. By the time others jumped in, it was already too late. And here's the thing, many of us as viewers knew it too. We could see the way the family was being used. We could see the way creators were pushing out content non-stop, not because it helped, but because it performed well. But we still clicked. We still watched, we still gave attention. And that's what really fuels these cycles. Not just the creators, but the audience that makes it profitable. If you take a step back, you realize this isn't really a story about one family. It's about the internet itself. It's about us. It's about the way attention, money, and fame warp everything they touch. The Whittakers are just one tragic example of how lives can be chewed up in the gears of online content creation. But they won't be the last. By the time Timmy, Lorraine, and Ray were removed from the home, the damage was already irreversible. They weren't just a family anymore, they were a brand, a piece of internet lore. No matter what happens to them from here on, they will always be remembered as the Whittakers from Odd, West Virginia, the family millions watched with fascination. Their fame has marked them forever. What makes this story so haunting is how powerless the family truly was. They didn't ask for this. They didn't choose to be filmed. They didn't have PR teams or managers to protect their image. They were thrust into the spotlight by someone else's decision, and once they were in it, they had no way out. They were caught in a system bigger than them, bigger than Mark, bigger than any individual YouTuber. They were caught in the internet itself. And when you think about that, it forces a hard question. Who's really responsible? Was it Mark for starting the videos? Was it the other creators who flooded their lives for content? Or was it us, the millions of viewers who couldn't look away? Maybe the truth is that all of us bear some responsibility. Because without the clicks, without the shares, without the donations, none of this would have happened. The cursed fame of the Whittakers isn't just their curse, it's ours too. It's a mirror reflecting back the way we consume content, the way we exploit, the way we turn people's lives into entertainment without thinking of the consequences. As the saga continued, new drama unfolded. Family members crying on live streams, others defending themselves online, creators nervously addressing criticism, spitting into cups midstream while promising they meant no harm. It all blurred together into a spectacle that felt more like a reality show than real life. But behind the camera, the pain was very real. For those who still followed closely, it became clear that the Whittakers needed more than views or money. They needed stability. They needed a secure home. They needed medical care. They needed dignity. And yet, those things never came. Instead, what came was more attention, more drama, and more destruction. By this point, even if you had never watched one of their videos, you probably knew their story. Their fame reached that level where their name itself became shorthand for tragedy and exploitation, and in that way, they were no longer just a family in West Virginia. They had become an internet myth, a modern-day cautionary tale about what happens when the camera doesn't just observe life, but alters it forever. So where does it go from here? What's left for the Whittakers after everything they've endured? That's the question hanging in the air as their story continues, and it's the question we'll explore further in part 3 as we look at the aftermath, the betrayals, and the haunting possibility that the family S story isn't just a tragedy at S, a warning for all of us about the price of fame. But for now, think about this. If you had never seen a video of the Whittakers, if their lives had never been turned into content, would they be better off today? Or did fame, in some twisted way, at least give them a chance at help they never would have had? Let me know what you think, because the truth might be more complicated than it seems. By the time the Whittaker story reached its breaking point, the situation had shifted from something resembling a documentary into something far more disturbing. What had started as a glimpse into an isolated family had turned into an ongoing drama, fed not by empathy, but by and as the state stepped in and removed Timmy, Lorraine, and Ray from the home, the spectacle only grew louder. The internet thrives on conflict, on cliffhangers, on the promise of what happens next, and for the Whittakers, every tragedy, every intervention, every tear became an episode in a reality show they never signed up for. The people behind the cameras, whether they admitted it or not, understood this. That's why so many live streams popped up. That's why the family's pain was replayed and recycled into clips across platforms. And that's why, even after the damage was done, the views kept rolling in. It's tempting to ask, why didn't anyone stop? Why didn't someone with power, someone with influence, step in and shut this down? But the answer lies in the very nature of internet fame. Once millions of people are watching, no single person controls the narrative anymore. Mark might have started it, other creators might have poured fuel on the fire, but once the audience was hooked, the story took on a life of its own. The Whittakers had become characters in a never-ending play, and as long as people kept tuning in, someone would always be there to supply content. Meanwhile, the family itself was unraveling. The removal of members was not just a legal action, it was an emotional earthquake. Imagine being in your 70s, like Ray, with failing knees and a lifetime of eating poor food, and suddenly your family is split apart. Imagine Lorraine, sitting with her bag of chips, suddenly whisked away in an ambulance, not knowing if she'd ever return home. The heartbreak wasn't just private anymore. It was live-streamed for strangers to watch and comment on, turning grief into spectacle. Even those who claimed to help often made things worse. One YouTuber filmed himself nervously addressing the situation, spitting tobacco into a cup every few seconds, while two Whittaker family members sat beside him in tears. It wasn't dignity, it was theater. It wasn't care, it was content, and viewers could sense it. Comments flooded in, some sympathetic, some angry, some mocking, but no matter what the reaction was, the result was the same. More views, more clicks, more engagement. The cycle of exploitation was relentless, and the family, powerless to stop it, could only endure. This is where the curse of their fame feels most evident. Fame had promised them help, a new home, donations, recognitions, but what it actually delivered was chaos, exposure, and separation. Their story had become too valuable to the internet to ever allow them peace again. Even if they got the house, even if they got caregivers, even if they received medical care, their privacy was gone forever. Wherever they went, people would recognize them. Wherever they lived, someone would eventually find them with a camera. The saddest irony of all is that the Whittakers' fame wasn't even theirs to control. They didn't own the videos, they didn't run the channels, they didn't see the bulk of the revenue. Their lives made others rich, while they were left with scraps, confusion, and broken trust. And once the money trail grew murky, once allegations of theft and misuse piled up, it was impossible for the family to know who to trust, if anyone. Some people tried to defend the creators. They said Mark meant well. They said the later YouTubers were just giving the family exposure, giving them a platform. But what good is a platform when you don't understand it? What good is fame when you can't navigate contracts, sponsorships, or business deals? What good is money if you don't even know if it's reaching you? That's why this story stings so much. It wasn't just exploitation. It was exploitation dressed up as generosity. Viewers could tell themselves they were helping by donating. Creators could tell themselves they were helping by filming. But in reality, the family's situation got worse, not better. And when the state had to step in, that was proof enough that the help had failed. What's worse is how familiar this cycle has become. Think about how often we've seen similar stories. Eccentric individuals filmed by strangers, suddenly turned into memes, briefly famous, then discarded. Sometimes they get money, sometimes they don't, but almost always they end up worse off than before. The internet gives, and the internet takes away. For the Whittakers, it took everything. Ray, approaching old age, needed medical attention and stability. Lorraine needed proper nutrition and health support. Timmy needed structure and care, but instead, they were given cameras in their faces. Endless speculation about their lives and the crushing pressure of millions of people knowing their names. By this stage of their story, even the tone of viewers had shifted. Early on, many people watched out of shock or morbid curiosity. Later, more viewers began to question whether this was right. Comment sections filled with debates. Were they being helped or exploited? Was this raising awareness or destroying a family? Those questions lingered, but they didn't stop the clicks. And as long as clicks existed, so did the incentive to keep filming. It's easy to say the creators were to blame, but isn't it also true that the audience created the demand? If millions of people hadn't clicked on those videos, if donations hadn't poured in, if curiosity hadn't exploded into viral fascination, none of this would have happened. The curse of the Whittakers' fame isn't just the story of a family destroyed by exposure. It's the story of how all of us, in small ways, participated in their exploitation. That's what makes this story so haunting. It forces us to see the darker side of internet culture, the side we don't like to admit we're part of. Because who among us hasn't clicked on a video out of curiosity, even when we knew it might be exploitative? Who hasn't laughed at a meme or shared a clip without thinking of the real human being on the other side? The Whittakers' tragedy is extreme, but it's also a mirror held up to us. And the family themselves, they're left to pick up the pieces of lives that will never return to normal. Their house, their health, their privacy, all of it compromised. Their relationships strained, their trust broken. And the videos remain online forever, ensuring that no matter what happens next, they will always be remembered not as people, but as subjects of one of the internet's most infamous viral sagas. Think about how heavy that burden must be. To be defined by your lowest moments, immortalized not for your triumphs, but for your struggles. To be remembered not for who you are, but for what others decided you represented. That's the curse of fame, stripped of all glamour. It's not glory, it's not fortune, it's being trapped in the worst version of yourself, frozen forever on a screen, for strangers to dissect until the end of time. And yet, the question lingers. Was it all bad? Were there people who genuinely tried to help? Did the exposure bring any real benefits? Maybe without the videos, the Whittakers would never have received any donations, any offers of support, any recognition of their difficult lives. Maybe, in some way, fame gave them opportunities they wouldn't have had otherwise, but the cost was staggering. Was it worth it? That's a question only they could answer, and one they may not even fully understand. As this saga dragged on, people began to demand answers. Where did the money go? Who could be trusted? What would happen to the family now? But the internet rarely provides closure. Videos stopped, streams ended, creators moved on. The audience was left with fragments, with speculation, with questions that may never be answered. And the family was left to live with the aftermath. That's the cruelest part of all. For the rest of us, the Whittaker story is just content. It's a video we watched, a comment we left, a discussion we had. But for them, it's life. It's their reality, their trauma, their family ripped apart. We can move on to the next viral sensation. They cannot, and so the curse continues. Their fame will never disappear. Their faces will never fade from memory. Their story will always linger, reshared, reposted, rediscovered by new audiences who don't know the full truth. For the Whittakers, there is no going back. The question now is not whether they were exploited, it's clear they were. The question is what happens next. Will they ever find peace? Will they ever get the home, the care, the stability they deserve? Or will they remain trapped in the cycle of viral fame, forever remembered as a cautionary tale about what happens when the internet turns real lives into entertainment? As we move into part 4, we'll confront that question directly. We'll look at what could have been done differently, what lessons we can learn, and whether there's any hope left for the Whittakers to escape the curse of their fame. But before that, I want to hear your thoughts. Do you think their fame helped them in any way, or was it nothing but destruction from the start? Drop your opinion in the comments, because this story is bigger than one family, it's about all of us. The story of the Whittakers is not just about what happened in the past, it's about what happens next. By the time the dust settled from all the drama, all the filming and all the chaos, the family had already been changed forever. Some of them were taken from their home. Others were left behind in tears, confused about where their loved ones had gone. The videos still lived online, circulating endlessly, and the people who had filmed them moved on to other projects. But for the Whittakers, the curse of their fame remained. The truth is, no matter what happens now, they will never escape the reputation that the internet carved into stone. Their faces have been seen by millions. Their names have been discussed in comment sections, podcasts, and news outlets. They have been turned into memes, into documentaries, into endless YouTube clips that cannot be undone. They are no longer just a family from odd West Virginia. They are symbols, remembered not for who they are but for what the internet turned them into. And that's the tragedy of it. Fame is often thought of as glamorous, but the Whittakers' fame has been toxic. It did not lift them up, it tore them down. Instead of providing stability, it destabilized them. Instead of offering security, it stripped them of privacy. Instead of helping them heal, it deepened the fractures within their family. It's a story that should make all of us pause, because it says so much about the world we live in. Think about how this unfolded. A man with a camera comes to town, records a few videos, uploads them online. Suddenly, a private family's life becomes global entertainment. Donations pour in, but so do rumors, temptations, and conflict. Other creators smell opportunity and swarm like vultures, fighting for attention while claiming they're there to help. Live streams broadcast tears, arguments, and tragedies. And in the end, the state steps in because things have gone too far. That's not just a story of one family, that's a blueprint of exploitation in the digital age. The hardest part is the realization that none of this was inevitable. It could have been different. If the money had been managed carefully, if the family had been given legitimate legal and medical support, if the cameras had shut off once help was in place, maybe the Whittakers could have experienced something good from their exposure. Maybe they could have had a new house, caregivers, and peace. But that's not how the internet works. The internet doesn't want closure. It doesn't want peace. It wants drama, spectacle, and endless content. And so the family became trapped in a cycle they could never escape. Even now, people debate, who is to blame? Was it Mark for introducing them to the world in the first place? Was it the other YouTubers who swarmed in after him, turning their home into a circus? Was it the viewers who watched, donated, and encouraged the cycle to continue? The uncomfortable truth is that it was all of the above. Fame like this doesn't happen because of one person, it happens because of an entire system. And that system is fueled by us, the audience. That's why the Whittaker story is more than just gossip or tragedy, it's a warning. It forces us to look at ourselves and ask why we consume what we consume. Why do we watch people's pain? Why do we laugh at those who are different? Why do we click on videos that turn someone else's suffering into a spectacle? The answers aren't simple, but the questions matter. Because as long as we ignore them, there will be more Whittakers, more families or individuals who find themselves chewed up by the machine of viral fame. So what now? What does justice look like for the Whittakers? In an ideal world, they would be given what they truly need: a safe and comfortable home, proper medical care, caregivers who understand them, and the dignity of privacy. They don't need endless streams, viral clips, or more strangers poking around their lives. They need security, peace, and compassion. But how can that happen when their story has already become too valuable for the internet to let go? There have been calls for new GoFundMe campaigns, for community-driven projects to build them a house, to provide ongoing support. But trust is the issue now. Too many donations have already been lost, misused, or surrounded by suspicion. Too many people have claimed to help while lining their own pockets. The trust of the public has been fractured, and that makes it even harder to provide genuine support. Even if someone tried to organize a legitimate fund, how many people would hesitate, wondering if their money would really reach the family? That's the ripple effect of exploitation. Once the trust is gone, even the possibility of true help is poisoned. And that may be the most lasting damage of all. But despite everything, there is still hope. Hope that people will see beyond the viral clips and remember that the Whittakers are human beings. Hope that those with influence and resources might step in to provide real, accountable support. Hope that maybe, with time, the family can find some stability away from the cameras. It won't erase the past, but it might give them a chance at a better future. Still, we cannot ignore the bigger picture. This story has exposed the darker side of internet culture, the part we don't want to admit we're complicit in. We live in a time when people with cameras can stumble upon vulnerable individuals, upload their lives, and create overnight sensations. We live in a time when exploitation is dressed up as awareness, when voyeurism is disguised as empathy. And until we reckon with that, the cycle will repeat. The Whittakers may be the most extreme example, but they won't be the last. Their cursed fame will live on as both tragedy and cautionary tale. For them, the damage is done. But for us, their story can serve as a wake-up call. We have to start asking harder questions about the content we consume, the creators we support, and the systems we enable with our attention. We have to draw lines about what should and shouldn't be entertainment. Because when the lines disappear, the cost is paid by people like the Whittakers. Imagine, for a moment, that it was your family. Imagine strangers filming your relatives, highlighting their struggles, amplifying their worst moments, and sharing them with the world. Imagine donations being misused, privacy being shattered, and family members being taken away while millions of strangers debated your worth in comment sections. It sounds unbearable, and yet that's the reality the Whittakers have lived for years. Their curse is not just their fame, it's that their humanity was overshadowed by the spectacle. They were seen as characters, as oddities, as symbols, but rarely as people. And in that transformation from human beings to internet content, something precious was lost. The story ends where it began, in odd West Virginia, with a family that never asked for fame. A family that, before the cameras arrived, lived quietly in their own way. A family that, for all its struggles, at least had each other. Now, they live in the aftermath of exposure, scattered and broken, their lives forever altered. For us, the viewers, the lesson is clear. Fame is not always a gift. Sometimes, it's a curse. Sometimes, the very thing that promises opportunity only brings destruction. And sometimes, by watching, we become part of that destruction. The Whittakers' name will not be forgotten. They will be remembered as a family caught in the harsh spotlight of viral fame, as people who became known for all the wrong reasons, as victims of a system that values views over dignity. But maybe, if we learn from their story, their suffering won't be in vain. Maybe their story will remind us to look at the people behind the videos, to see their humanity, and to ask ourselves whether our curiosity is worth the cost. And maybe, just maybe, their story will inspire us to change. So I'll leave you with this final thought. The Whittakers did not choose fame, but they are living with its consequences. If the same spotlight turned on you tomorrow, how would you survive it? And if you knew the price, would you still want to be famous? Let me know in the comments what you think. Was there any good in what happened to the Whittakers, or was their fame doomed from the start? Thank you for watching this video. Click here to watch another video that might interest you.